Kia ora koutou, everybody. I think we are live now, but we're just going to give it a minute or so if anyone else wants to come on. Kia ora koutou, everybody, and welcome to our live judging panel to decide the winner of What's Your Impact competition. My name's Henry McClintock and I'm a partner here at BDO. Look, this morning's session, this lunchtime session is designed to be a sort of fairly relaxed affair. We don't want to be too high pressured, and we're really looking forward to hearing from the 5 finalists and finding a little bit more about them and their impact journey. In regard to the competition, we've been really delighted to team up with Impact Lab. They do a fantastic job of helping organisations understand their impact a little bit more and try to help them determine their social return on investments. So being involved with them, getting to know more what they do and getting them involved with more organisations that we work with has been a really cool part of this process. So thank you to everybody who's been involved. We had around over 40 entries overall, which was fantastic. And it's such a terrible cliche, but it is always really hard to decide, of those 40 who comes into the 5 to present this morning and or lunchtime, because there's as we know in this sector, so many fantastic organisations doing some brilliant stuff in such a wide variety of places. So it's great to have read some of the stories and this morning to hear from our 5 finalists as to their journey. So the 5 finalists we're going to hear from this morning in a minute are Sisters of Compassion, NISA, Friendship House, Hohepa Canterbury and Arthritis New Zealand. So that's the main event. Just before we get on to those guys, I'd just like to introduce you also to our judging panel. This morning we've got Sir Bill English, who is the chair of Impact Lab and also a former New Zealand Prime Minister. Good morning, Bill. And we also have Lisa King, who's the founder of Eat My Lunch. So thanks for coming on. Good morning, Lisa.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, it is indeed, thank you. And Justin Martin, who's also a BDO advisory partner. Good morning, Justin. Good afternoon, Justin.
Good afternoon, Henry, and everyone. Looking forward to being here and getting into the competition.
Great, fantastic. And then the fourth musketeer, is that right? The 4th judge is myself as well. So again, the 4 of us are really looking forward to hearing from the panelists, which is the main part of today's event. So how it will work is each of the finalists will have 10 minutes to present to us, to tell us about them and about their impact journey. And then that will be followed by a 5-minute Q&A session where the judges will ask 1 or 2 questions of the finalists. And then we'll hear from each 5 finalists, all getting a fair shot to talk to us and tell us and all those listening about what that organisation is trying to achieve. So, and then right at the end, we'll have a brief summary from the judges as to their thoughts on the finalists and their presentations, and then we'll go away and deliberate in a room somewhere or online somewhere and come back with the winner to be announced tomorrow. So again, once again from me, thanks ever so much. It takes a lot of people to bring this together, so I really appreciate everybody's support to get there. Thanks for everybody who participated, and thanks particularly to the 5 finalists who are going to talk now. So without further ado, first up is Chris Calvin from Sisters of Compassion. So good afternoon, Chris. Really great to have you here, and over to you. Look forward to hearing about what you're doing with Sisters of Compassion.
Ko tēnā koutou katoa, nā mihi nui kia koutou, ko Chris Gallivan tōku ingoa. Thanks for the opportunity to present. I've got 10 minutes and I'm going to start with a pause. And also some words from Susanna Biamiri Hohepa. She said, let us have a balm for every suffering, a consolation for every pain, a smile for every tear, forgiveness for every failing, sweetness for every bitterness of heart. Next slide. Thanks, Laura. The Sisters of Compassion have been around since 1892 as a separate order, New Zealand's first and only homegrown religious order. We have now about 35 sisters that are left, and we're an organisation that has of a considerable size, $300 million capital assets, $11 million turnover a year, and about 150 staff. We're going through a succession planning program at the moment that really transitions us from a sister-orientated and run organisation to one is more around lay people, run and organised organisation. We have 5 areas of service over 6 sites, which include, among others, 220 social housing units in the lower half of the North Island, the soup kitchen, which will be the subject of my discussion here today, and the area of our service that I'd like to be able to talk about our social impact. But also we run extensive elder care facility in Upper Hutt and also in Suva, looking after the disabled and the disadvantaged. So housing, elder care and food security are the areas of our main concern. Next slide. Our strategic objectives revolve around our enduring values that have been around for 130 years. And while a lot of people talk about partnership under Te Tiriti o Waitangi now, Susanna Beer was talking about it 130 years ago. Her first language out of France in 1860 was Te Reo Māori. She wrote a dictionary of Māori conversations with Māori in 1880, published in the early 1900s. And our relationship with Māori, particularly up the river, is a very strong one. Our 5 enduring values are absolutely core to who we are and what we stand for, and we have a mandate from Susanna Biamiri Hohepa to be at the forefront of where the greatest need in New Zealand is. We've been involved in a lot of things over our more than a century of existence, and many of those things we're no longer involved in because the nature of the need in New Zealand has changed. But our strategic priorities are threefold. That no one unnecessarily goes hungry in the Greater Wellington region over the next 3 years. That substantively address loneliness and social isolation in Wellington. And that we collaborate with others to lead social and political change in the area of homelessness and housing insecurity. Next slide. I want here for this part of the presentation to focus in on the soup kitchen. Next slide. The soup kitchen has run for 121 years this year. We're incredibly proud of that. It's been at a few different sites, and at the moment it's in Tory Street, in a property that we own in the upper half of Tory Street. It has a very particular kaupapa in that it's not merely a food provider. We're an integral component of food security provision in Wellington, in the Wellington city, and we hope in the Greater Wellington region in the years to come. As we can see there from this slide, in the last year we've served 31,588 meals. Next slide. During lockdown, we actually increased the daily average meals of about 120 to 150 to over 220, so between 220 and 235 meals. Up until COVID and lockdown, we offered morning service and also an evening indoor service, and very much in a relationship of ask no questions. We serve anybody who turns up at the door. A large part of our whānau, as we call them, are actually those who are incredibly impoverished and actually homeless. But actually we provide a lot of meals to other service agencies around the Wellington region, who then in turn offer those to whoever may be in need, and we've seen that increase. We're expecting at least half again, if not doubling, over the Omicron period, and we have, as you can see from our strategic plan, an objective to actually substantively increase the impact of the soup kitchen. Next slide. We don't offer just merely food. We're not actually just merely about filling a belly with food, however important that is. We're about providing a kaupapa of addressing those concerns and those needs that we see for the people that we have a relationship with. We're about relationships, either with other social service providers, but also for the people that we service as well. We want to be able to create a kaupapa of a community. One thing why the people who use our services are so connected to them is that we've managed over our long period of provenance is to instill a very real belief that this is their space and it is a safe space. So we offer, among other things, the 13 services that I've listed there, either ourselves or we facilitate it through other social service providers. They include gardening, sewing, visits with nurses, haircuts, clothing store, showers, laundry, even IT and information technology access, but also improving their understanding and access to it. Next slide. We understand, and this is where our strategic priorities have come from, about the broader scope and the broader context in which the whānau, those people who we serve through the soup kitchen, the challenges they face. None of these should be a surprise to any of us here, of course, and the other 4 great finalists will be dealing with many of these things on a daily basis as well. But we know that homelessness is now a crisis in New Zealand, and 1% might not sound much, but 50,000 people, although I must stress that our whānau are not necessarily entirely the homeless. We're not talking about necessarily the abject poor. What we have seen was in an unachievable and ballooning housing market that we're actually getting middle income New Zealanders who are unable to provide the security of housing that they so desperately need, that is actually the core to the fabric of the social cohesion. This slide really provides the context to our strategic objectives. And even though I've just sort of skirted over the fact that we know much in terms of the raw statistics of our social impact, here really emphasises what we need to know and what we need to understand, the gaps in our understanding about how we can be effective with those strategic priorities. There's no point for me to go from the strategic priorities to an operational plan without actually understanding at core what our social impact is. So my pitch in terms of this presentation is to say that without strategic priority, with our ability to work with our partners, for us to really make a real difference and for us to not merely just waste resources, but to be targeted and to assure ourselves of achievable targets and improvement within social impact, we have to have a matrix that gives us a line of sight as to our ability and our effectiveness in what we're doing. We understand that socialisation is really a crisis in New Zealand, which really is only increasing with the lockdowns through Omicron. And that 16.5% of New Zealanders have said they felt lonely at particular times. Social isolation is not always a choice, and it is an epidemic that is related to the issue of the insecurity and the lack of trust and cohesion that we see within our societies. We can't do this alone, and we have a number of partners that we work with. Our strategic priorities are not merely ours alone. We actually advance them, particularly on the issue of combating loneliness, by increasing our network and our collaboration with others. Again, without an ability to effectively understand our social impact, we are going to undoubtedly, as we have done in the past, operate in isolation and operate ineffectively by commissioning resources into areas that we might hope and have a gut feeling, and by innuendo, think that we have an impact, but not really have a marker of that. Next slide.
Great. Good question. About 1 minute left. Oh, they're perfect.
There's a summary. We have a great provenance. We have a number of different areas that we focus on. The soup kitchen here is what I would like, if we were successful for the matrix of social impact to be applied to the work of the soup kitchen. We have some pretty significant strategic priorities that we want to capitalise on our momentum that we've built up over 121 years, but we really want to take it to the next stratosphere, the next level, to work in collaboration to really change things in the Greater Wellington region. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Chris. 10 minutes is a short period of time, as we know, and you did a brilliant job of summarising not only the history and legacy of Suzanne Aubert, but what that means for you guys today. So in terms of questions, Sibyl, I think you had a question for Chris on his presentation.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just to acknowledge the work of the sisters, I remember going to the Home of Compassion in Silverstream when I was a 13-year-old, and it was then dealing with what were called, I think it was called psychopedic. It was actually just chronically disabled children, you know, babies and cots and things, and left an impression on me, and I'm working in that area these days. My question was just about the very good point you made about moving from strategic priorities to an operational plan. The Impact Lab tool is essentially a predictive one. It looked at changes in trajectory, essentially. That is, if people have a set of circumstances, here's what we might expect to happen to them over the next 4 or 5 years. And then the intervention logic is around changing it, which of course in some cases is very challenging, in other cases more successful. So when you're focusing on the soup kitchen, just tell us what might amount to a change in the journey for for your customers coming in, some of whom you'll know well because they've been doing it for a while.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sibyl. Look, I can give a really poignant and I think a direct answer to that. And it relates to our third strategic priority, which is to work collaboratively with our partners to change and to lobby, to advocate socially and politically for substantive change. Look, at our 121 years of the history of the soup kitchen, but in fact all of our areas of service, we have effectively hit a light under a bushel. We've done a great deal of work in actually providing that food security, housing security, the care of children, the care of the elderly and the disabled. But we haven't worked in the past in a way that has been perhaps more publicly seen to be able to leverage the experience that we've gathered, the momentum that we've built in a way that actually tries to change the hearts and minds of a community and of legislatures. And we want to do that. We want to be able to work, again, not by ourselves, but with others, to really be a voice and a contributor in the future to how things can positively change as opposed to dealing with the symptoms only. So that, Sibyl, I think hopefully is a good example with which we're going to change. We're actually fundamentally wanting to change from being a service provider of actually addressing an immediate concern to actually trying to be part of the solution with our built experience as to what we think we might be able to collectively put together to ensure that these problems are actually solved before they begin, as opposed to merely addressing the symptoms at the bottom of the cliff.
Yeah, so you've got these, you've got people coming to the soup kitchen. So what would amount to a successful relationship with an individual who's coming in that might mean that they are going to do something different? Understand your macro point, that's directly relevant, but what about for the individual person?
Sure. Well, first of all, might I say that we've got a very strong relationship with the individual. Second of all, that we've got 120 years. One of the reasons we have that strong relationship is we haven't seen ourselves as a one-stop shop. We've stuck to our knitting in a sense. So we've actually resisted the urge to have every government department, for example, and triage those and say, well, you need to go to floor 1 or floor 2 or floor 3. Because what we've found in actually building that relationship is those types of environments are inherently challenging for the people that we work with. And while it might sound very convenient and efficient for us, is actually counterproductive to building that relationship. But what we do find is that in building that relationship, we actually get a line of sight that many others don't as to the hardships and the difficulties of these people and how they got themselves into that situation. So what we would do, not actually just doing the whole wraparound service and being a triage, but actually working one-on-one with those individuals in order to be able to say, well, look, what are your particular needs, rather than just merely giving you a cell phone which they lose or trade in or sell for whatever reason next day, but actually building the relationship up to work in a much more nuanced way to facilitate the relationships that they need to be able to get them back on their feet, built all from a basic understanding of actually who they are, what they're about, and how they got to the situation, recognising that we are one of the very few organisations that's had the luxury of building that nature of that relationship.
I'm going to jump in there because I imagine this is sort of conversation. This is going to be the issue we're going to have, right? That the conversation could go on, but you know, thank you very much, Chris, and a good conversation, Sybil. But I'm going to move on now to Elisha from NISA. So Elisha, it's great to have you here, and we're really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about NISA and what NISA does and how you determine the impacts that you're having for the people that you work with.
Awesome. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Elisha. I'm guessing that I'm off mute. Is that all good to go?
Yep, we can hear you.
So I am the CEO and founder of NISA, and I'm really excited to be pitching for this competition, to be sitting alongside a panel of very esteemed judges and co-competitors. NISA is an ethical underwear, swimwear and activewear label, and we exist to create employment opportunities for women from refugee and migrant backgrounds in our Wellington workshop. Could I please go to slide 2? Our vision is a world full of opportunities for everyone, and our focus is really on opportunities through employment, in particular for refugee and migrant women. We have an audacious dream of having an alumni of 100 former employees who have used NISA as a springboard for their career in New Zealand and who go on to inspire their own communities. Next slide, please. So some stats behind that mission. So nearly half of refugees in Aotearoa identify a good job as one of the most important factors of feeling part of New Zealand life. However, 5 years after arrival, the employment rate among former refugees in Aotearoa is only 40 to 50%. Now, this is twice as severe for women, with only a quarter of women from refugee backgrounds in Aotearoa in employment 5 years after arrival. Now, before I started NISA, I used to be a lawyer, so you'll have to forgive me for my previous sins. I actually used to work around the corner from the BDO offices here. But when back in my lawyering days, I was also volunteering with the refugee community outside of work through the Community Law Centre, providing legal advice, and also with the Red Cross through their refugee resettlement program. And I guess I met a lot of people, and I guess for me, these statistics seem very abstract. The way that I look about it is very much through the lens of the people that I met through that journey. I saw a lot of hope on arrival, people getting into their houses, setting up their life, feeling so excited about this new chapter for themselves and for their children, and the despair that usually sets in maybe a year, 2 years into their journey after they've gone through the process of getting into language class. They feel confident-ish with their English and realizing that their qualifications that they had from back home, or their lack of local work experience, or just the nature of the economy in New Zealand meant that there weren't any opportunities for them. For so many people, I think we can all identify this. Going to work every day is a crucial part of feeling like you have a normal life. And the people who arrive in New Zealand as refugees, or indeed as migrants, want exactly that same thing. So I quit my job as a lawyer to set up a business to do just that, which is to create opportunities. I was really interested about the idea of social enterprise, and I knew that a business is the only way that you can really sustainably employ people through time. And I identified a skill set in the former refugee community. I personally have a love of sewing, and a lot of women in the community shared that love and talent with me. So I thought creating a brand that created garments that people could wear would be a good way to create a product and then an income stream to support that employment. So here we are nearly 5 years later. We were started in 2017 with a successful underwear, activewear and swimwear label. Could I please go to the next slide? So here's a picture of some of the team in the workshop. Most of our team are from refugee and migrant backgrounds, in line with our mission of inclusive employment. On the bottom left there, we have the places that our employees have come from, past and present. This list includes Afghanistan, Brazil, Colombia, Hong Kong, Iran, Iraq, Myanmar, Somalia, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Syria, and Vietnam. And I can't wait for that list to grow in the future. Since our launch in 2017, we've employed 36 people, 20 from refugee backgrounds and 4 from migrant backgrounds. In a nutshell, we've created a workshop that acts as a place to belong rather than just a place to work. Can I go to the next slide, please? In terms of our social impact, I guess we go deep with our team. We don't touch millions of people's lives. We touch deeply the lives of the people that work with us. So I think some kind of quotes from them is really illustrative of the kind of impact that we have. The top is from Jajani, who's from Colombia. And when she started working with us, her English wasn't great. She really struggled during the interview, but we took her on and she absolutely flourished. Her English improved so much. And now, with a bit of help and encouragement, she has just moved down to Dunedin to do a bridging year for health science with the dream of becoming a dentist. When she left, I had an exit interview with her and I said, you know, do you have anything else you want to say? And she said the following. I wrote it down and asked if I could share it because I thought it was so special. She said, I'm so glad to know that here in New Zealand, there's this kind of opportunity for women like me who come from refugee backgrounds. It's a little light that we can see before us as we settle into life in New Zealand. Other things our staff members have said is what working at NISA means to them is simply that working at NISA means feeling excited in the mornings, having a purpose to get up every day and something to proudly tell your friends and family about. Our employees say that working at NISA has improved their English, made them feel more confident in the community, and has obviously given them job relevant skills that we teach them on at work, for example, related to marketing, sewing, or dispatch. Next slide, please. Our strategy for improving our impact is quite a simple one. Growing the company means we can create more jobs. We also want to partner with educational institutions like Fashion Tech so that we can take on staff who haven't previously sewn before, for example, because at the moment we can only take on staff that already have pre-existing abilities. We'd like to extend that out a bit. And we are also focusing on training our junior staff members to become seniors. Next slide, please. In terms of how Impact Lab can help, for us, a huge thing is communication. So we're a business. We're not registered as a charity, and we have maybe, I think last count, maybe 14 or 15,000 customers all over the world. And a key thing for us is that is helping us communicate the impact that we have on people and how this kind of impact model works, and helping us to really kind of pinpoint that. And then secondly, helping us to partner with other organizations. So we don't really do much, well, we don't really do anything, to be honest, with other government departments. Whereas I know that, like, for example, WINS and MSD, there's a lot of overlap between what they're trying to achieve and what we're trying to achieve, but we just don't have the language or the tools to really interact with government in any meaningful kind of way, or even understand the kind of language that they want us to use. And then lastly, working with Impact Lab would mean allow us to kind of work out what we should be measuring with our staff and helping us identify new opportunities for impact. So last slide, please. So that's everything I wanted to say. You can check us out online at nisa.co.nz, and that's our social media handle there. But I hope that presentation, which I'm quite short and sweet, but I hope really captured the core of what we're about and what we're trying to achieve. And hopefully that means we can have some more time for questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Elijah. That is, and again, a 10-minute summary, a really clear picture of what you do. You know, organisations like this are always set up with somebody like an audacious dream, and so you know, the fact that you took that audacious dream, and it seems to be you're actually a reasonable way to achieving your initial audacious dream, which is in 5 years, which is fantastic. So a pretty good link with social enterprise. But Lisa, I'll hand it over to you for any questions you've got for Alicia.
Hi, Alicia. Thanks so much for that. As yeah, you know, I love the fact that you are a social enterprise and that you are using a business to really kind of sustain and grow that impact that you have. I was really interested in typically how long do these women stay with you in employment, and do you have any data or idea in terms of what they go to next? So that one example you gave, they went into education, but what else are these women kind of moving on to?
Yeah, so there's actually, I was looking at we do collect data on this, and it's a bit like, it's quite a widespread. So some of them go on to other work, either within the fashion industry or they go into a completely different industry. And we see that, we chalk that up as an absolute success. So if people stay with us for ages, we're like, great, we get the benefit of their expertise that they've grown in their time with us. And if they leave, we're like, great, we've achieved our mission and we've given you opportunities to go into that next step. So we see it as a total win-win. So people either leave to go into employment in the industry or outside of the industry. We have some employees who go on to tertiary education. So for example, Jajani, who's just left for the University of Otago. And then we also have some employees who move. So we just had an employee who moved to Australia, and we actually found her a job in Melbourne with a similar social enterprise. But the story's not always rosy. So we have, because especially our staff tend to have quite complicated lives. So we've had people leave us, for example, because their husband has found work and they don't have childcare sorted. We've had people leave us because their family members have become unwell and there's no one else to act in that caring capacity. But yeah, usually the majority of people go on to even better and bigger things, and we're so proud of that.
Awesome.
And if I can just ask you, Elijah, do you have something to track that data of what, you know, in terms of, you know, alumni? And so you've got a couple of great stories there.
Yeah. So we've had 36 staff since we started, so it's not actually that hard to track. It's 36 lines of spreadsheet. And so we know what they, you know, obviously their role, when they started, when they left, what they went on to do, and then some impact tracking around that.
Fantastic. And and I think you might have mentioned anyway in your submission, but is there any other data that you have, you know, in terms of the population that you do look after and migrants and refugees to help demonstrate how you intervene and change their lives?
So actually the government agency who has the most to say about this is what's the really long one? MB. What is it? Can't even remember what it stands for, but MB's
good.
Yeah, because and they have a lot of their stats around employment outcomes, and I think they're actually, because they kind of do the immigration side of things as well, they're very involved in this space. But yeah, it's very the employment stats for the former refugee community are pretty dire when you look at them, and there are supports out there for sure, but I think actually people just need jobs. They don't need like a tool to find a job. They just need a job. So yeah. Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. Again, there will always be more questions, but I'm conscious of time. So again, thanks very much. Awesome to hear, particularly for social enterprise and the impact that you can have through business operated in the right area. So now we'll move on to Friendship House, and Neil, welcome, and I will pass over to you to tell us a little bit about Friendship House and how you guys, what you do and how you guys measure your impact.
Kia ora. So my name is Neil Denny. I'm the Chief Executive here at Friendship House. Stories can often start with a once upon a time, but they don't always end with a happily ever after. Why? We often don't get to know how the ever after looks for our clients. So today I want to give you a 30-second elevator pitch about Friendship House, our strategic vision and our key flagstones, our impact journey to date, and how understanding that impact journey will help us to achieve our strategic vision as we move forward, and then hopefully answer some of your questions. We've worked with people for over 30 years in the violence and family harm space. We're gaining new understandings of the complexities of the violence and family harm narrative and understanding its long-ranging impacts. It is a national issue of high importance. Thousands of women, children and perpetrators have joined our 45-year journey. We've learned much along the way, but the journey is far from over. We offer social work and counselling services for people who are vulnerable as a result of family violence or violence, and we run Living Without Violence programs for perpetrators. The heart of change in our community. Next slide, please. Our strategic vision, to be the heart of change in our community. Our current strategic and operational plan and our key performance indicators run until June 2022. It has been underpinned by the flagstones of community, finance, revenue, contracts, relationships, tiriti o waitangi, people, development, information technology and planning. Sorry, that was a mouthful. Our next strategic plan will be informed by the work currently underway to move Friendship House to being a tiriti o waitangi based organisation and using our results with individuals to make positive impacts for families, victims, perpetrators and the wider community. We would like a greater understanding of our wider impact so that our strategy can align with the needs that we discover in our community. A new strategic flagstone, impact. We need to know our impact in order to base our strategy on impact-led data in the future. Knowing our impact gives us the information that we need to spread our resources into those areas where the most impact is needed. So we ask ourselves the question, how is impact felt and are our social investments being targeted efficiently and equitably in our client cohort? We fund or part fund a number of services, and this is a vital piece of data required to ensure we are effective and we are using taxpayer and donated money efficiently. Investing in data that enhances services for a client and allows us to see a positive change in the community will be a flagstone of future strategic planning. This will use client need, operational interventions, intervention logic, and impact measurement. Results-based accountability asks us the main questions. How much did we do for the individual? How well did we do it? And is anyone better off or what difference did we make? We ran services and undertook organisational program design and have ongoing reviews of our strategy and our program design. We have client self-reporting and our funder contracted number and volumes reports of interactions. We know what our clients self-report if they do complete the program. However, the somewhat transient nature of the population makes follow-up in the short to medium term difficult. Making contact is always difficult. Mobile phone numbers are changed when the phone is sold to feed the family. Families move to the other side of the city when their rent is behind or there are issues in a multiple family household. One local school reported in 2019 that they had a 65% turnover in their role because of transient nature of the school. Family harm can cause up to 3 days of lost work, lead to unemployment, and 7 days of lost school or study time. It can impact the health department and ACC services. We know the comorbidities of alcohol and other drugs impact heavily on families and are major contributors to family harm episodes. Ongoing court appearances can lead to job loss and whakamā. However, longitudinal data on recidivism and service dependency is unfortunately difficult to obtain from our referral agencies. We rely on client self-reporting, their narratives, and their service mapping. That's how many services or agencies they engaged with in the previous month. A random client file review showed that a client had engaged with 15 services in the past 30 days. 15 services that all need to have appointments made, stories told, time off work or school. Even a call to MSD now can leave a client on hold or waiting for a call back from MSD for up to 4 hours. We need to work with an organisation that will assist us to collect and use data to tell our story, measure our impact, inform our practice, and feed into a funder's understanding of the issues. We see families and whānaus across the Auckland region and follow their journey for a funded 18 weeks. In many situations, we see the same whānau in different services within our own organisation and in other allied organisations. Each year, the cost of providing services increases, and a portion of this funding must be found by the NGO. With budget constraints, it's imperative that we know our investment is sound and creating real impact for the community. The triggers to violence and family violence are many: poverty, shared households, literacy and numeracy, underemployment, low wages, just to name a few. And these often lead to numerous agencies working with the one family or whānau. True impact would be resilience at a whānau and community level. We'd like to undertake research into our community impact to collect data and enable this to take place. For Friendship House, the investment impact question, what difference did we make, has been problematic to research. The data we need is held across multiple government agencies who refer victims and perpetrators, and it's not been obtainable. Collecting data showing recidivism rates and our client outcomes from referring agencies is not possible at this time. The databases used across agencies are not aligned. As an example, the Justice System Identifier does not follow the client. One man may have many court numbers, but the number does not follow the man. When a man reoffends, they may ask to go to another family harm service, and we are not aware that this has happened. We have tried on numerous occasions to gather data, and we've met with little success, even to the point of using Privacy Act Principle number 11, where the data is anonymised and is able to be used for research. This leads us to a situation of needing to design a project to measure long-term impact. We want to work with BDO, an impact lab, to undertake longer-term impact review of data to research, analyse and measure our impact 3, 6 or 12 months from the last interaction with a client. A project to fully understand the roadblocks, to use whānau voices and lived experience. How can we better use data to tell our story and create impact that leaves a lasting crater and not a dent that simply refills? So here I am today. I've given you some information in the hope that we can begin a partnership that gives us the opportunity to answer, what is your impact? I'll just go back to that last slide, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Neil. It's an incredibly difficult area that you work in, and you articulated very well the challenges not only you face in your area, but the challenges you face in determining impact in terms of obtaining data. I feel I can see Sir Bill with some keen thoughts on this, but Justin, I think you had a couple of questions, or a question maybe first, and we'll see if we may bring in Sir Bill afterwards.
Yeah, thanks, Henry, and thanks, Neil. That was a great presentation. So look, it's clear the key issue is establishing impact after the project ends. And so I suppose if the Good Measure report could show you some areas to improve, what would your approach be to integrating that into your current practice?
We would be able to have a look at what the impact was and what happens to men and their families further down the track from our last interaction, and use that to inform perhaps the way that our our programs are run so that they include those issues and those items that will create that impact for families.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. So Bill, did you have any thoughts or comments on this question? Then I'm sure it's something you're familiar with.
Well, I just thought the analysis was absolutely bang on of an issue actually Impact Lab has to try and grapple with as well. You know, our tool, we use you know, data about populations like the one that that Friendship House deals with, but it's not the actual people, and therefore face the same challenges to find out, to be able to gather from disparate sources what might happen. And I thought you're you know, raising an example of the man who's in the court system gets a different number every time is just the kind of very boring administrative problem, which if solved would enable all sorts of good things to happen.
Absolutely.
So you know, I learned an awful lot from listening to you. Thanks very much.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
I guess, Neil, just one thought for me, in terms of you articulated the problems of getting data, if you could change a single thing, you know, we talked about the numbers assigned, but if you could change one thing, what would you try and change into your ability to obtain data to measure it better?
I would like to see government agencies that are working in the family harm and violence space somehow share their data, be that through the use of a single database or through another portal, so that agencies can see what the clients that are being referred, what interventions they have already had, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and so that we can then start measuring and tailoring solutions to those measurements.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a helpful thing? And
chances fine thing.
yeah, but we can but start and ask those questions. So look, Neil, that was fantastic. Thank you. A good summary of a challenging situation, and certainly something to think about how Impact Lab could be involved. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time and your thought in putting together your presentation. I'm going to jump on now to Anna from Hohepa Canterbury, and welcome, Anna. Good to have you on board. We look forward to hearing from you, telling us a bit about what you guys do and how you've found measuring your impact and the challenges you face and the solutions you've been able to find.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Anna Trellis, and I have the absolute privilege and responsibility of being the General Manager here at Hohepa Canterbury. And alongside me today, I have got Marianne Van Handel, who we all affectionately know as Baz, that we've supported for many years, and her support staff, Stephen Roberts. Next slide, please. Since 1965, Hohepa Canterbury has provided services and supports to people with an intellectual disability. Hohepa Canterbury's got a real legacy of challenging the expectations and norms of what a good life can look like for people with an intellectual disability. And that started with these gorgeous faces in this photo taken in 1968, who attended our residential Steiner School, focused on holistic learning and development as a real alternative to the institutionalised care that was the norm at the time. Baz, who is with me today, is one of 8 original students at the school, noted in this ledger book as student number 3, and has been with us since the 30th of August 1965, since we opened. Primarily, Hohepa Canterbury provide residential support for people with an intellectual disability, and we've got a responsibility and philosophy that therefore sees us influencing the whole of a person's life. Our supports and services are considered for many lifelong, as Baz demonstrates, and that means our commitment and impact differs from something that's time-bound, specific, or has a very tight focus. In addition to residential support, we offer programs Monday to Friday that are options based for people, individualised and independent living support and personalised support. Our kaupapa is every life fully lived. Currently, that means 168 different aspirations for what a good, real, ordinary or amazing life might look like. And so what's important to us is how we approach this, and that's best summed up in our culture statement. Our secret ingredient is laughter. We greet the day with positivity and passion, bringing all of ourselves, head, heart and hands. Building on our shared history and philosophy, we challenge the status quo for the good of all people and the disability sector. We celebrate the uniqueness of each individual. We are all different, and that is what makes us interesting. Next slide, please. As we strive to realise our vision and mission, we've identified three strategic priorities, as noted on this slide: identity, dynamic and innovative. Kaupapa Canterbury, as you can imagine, has made a number of transitions in its rich history, and we're poised to do that again now as we move from universal service models and design to individualised support options. Our priorities are aligned to our vision for this future, and in fact, of the 168 people that we support today, 50 of those are already receiving bespoke support options enabled through new funding models. That's more than half of the people that receive universal supports like our residential support. We've only been playing in that space for 5 short years. We've got more than 80 people with an intellectual disability on our wait list who would like our support, and it's really clear to us that to serve those people well and to enable their lives to be fully lived, we cannot continue to provide universal service models the way we typically have. It's clear to us that young intellectually disabled people transitioning from the education system want real lives that look just like those of their siblings or peers. And actually many of the people we've supported for a long time want that too. At the top of our organisational objectives for 2 years has been to understand social impact and how these models might help us to articulate the value of the work that we do. Individualised support options do create some challenges for articulating our impact at a cohort, organisational or even population level, but we know that every life fully lived can't come from universal design. Next slide. I'd like to invite Baz to share the motto of the social ethic with you all.
The healthy social life is found when in the mirror of the human soul, the whole community finds its reflection, and when in the community the virtue of each is living.
Thank you, Baz. The motto of the social ethic summarises the philosophy of anthroposophy that inspires us. And this whakatauki is something that we often share at the beginning of our meetings to keep us focused. I would suggest that from an anthroposophical standpoint, that social impact has been intrinsic in why our organisation exists, what we do and how we do it. And as with our vision for every life fully lived, we know there are impacts that ripple into the wider community from what we do, our social impact, if you will. Next slide. Our social impact journey is reflected in 3 stories that I want to share with you today. The first in Baz's story. Baz has been with Kaupapa, as I said, quite literally since day one, and this press article captures Baz's role as our resident historian. Baz's capacity for remembering people, places and things is pretty phenomenal. Baz is lucky she can carry her own story. But not everybody we support due to their intellectual disability can do that, and so we rely on a lot of information in our organisation that we've been charged with keeping because of legislation, contracts, or just because it's the right thing to do. When we look around, we've got a lot of data touch points to draw from: financial information, data sets from notes, specialist reports, audit monitoring notes, and notes on the people that we serve. The information we have available is the product of the environment we've been operating in. I think there are many people like Baz that we can demonstrate a social impact around their stories, but that possibly we've overserved a population of people for a long time. So our social impact journey to date has been really identifying that this is an area that we want to look at, that there are frameworks there that can help us articulate what we do, and we're on a bit of a discovery phase around figuring out how we might measure social impact for the things that we offer and do, and that's actually what's led us here today. The reality is we know we have an impact, and right now that's most clearly expressed in individual stories. We need to figure out how we leverage those in a different way, add the hard facts to support us to tell the story and to measure our social impact. We want to do that, we just haven't figured out how. We need to pull all the threads together. Next slide. The big question for disability providers, including us, is how do we know we're fulfilling our kaupapa? Every life fully lived is ambitious and hugely varied in the way that that's experienced by the people that we serve. But as I said, we know we have an impact. With Joel's permission, who's on the left of the slide, I briefly will share his story. In 2016, Joel was in his third year of being supported residentially here at Hohepa. So he lived in a house with other people and had 24-hour support staff available to him. He had the potential, like Baz has been, to be part of our supports for his whole lifetime. In 2016, Joel entered a speech competition with the theme of My Good Life, and he very clearly expressed that his good life looked like a flat share with 3 other people, cooking nachos, pancakes and roast chicken. Joel has 8 siblings, and it was really clear that he wanted what they had. As a provider, we've just been a bit slow to catch on. Then the opportunity arose to flat the 2 other gentlemen, Mark and Michael, who were provided support by Daniel and Adam that you also see in this slide. So Joel made a significant transition from 24/7 to support to independent living, funded at 10 hours per week. Then, and again we're a bit slow to catch up, Joel let us know that he wanted to move in with his girlfriend, which is pretty ordinary for a 20-something to want to do. And at that time, Joel's family purchased a home that he then rented with a flatmate and his girlfriend for a period of time. At that same time, Joel secured part-time employment, and further, the decision was made that he no longer required support from us. He is now living an ordinary life like others his age. He easily could have been captured in our residential system, a universal design, but because we were able to put something together specifically for him, he's transitioned to fully living his life. Next slide. In 2017, Stephanie, seen here, was referred to us for residential support. Stephanie's given permission for us to share her story, and in fact I've heard her all morning telling everybody about how we're going to share that today on this forum. She's very excited and very proud that we're sharing her story. Stephanie had been living in a specialist psychiatric inpatient facility in Canterbury for at least 18 months when we were introduced to her. Her family were really anxious to find her somewhere to live, and prior to her being in the inpatient facility, another provider had spent a few years trying many different options for Steph, and none had quite worked for her. So Stephanie moved into a flat of her own on our campus here in Christchurch, and she was part of therefore a wider supportive community while having a home of her own. She had support paid for between 6 AM every morning and 8 PM every night, and relied on staff in the house next door overnight if she needed help. For a long time, we spent time building trust and rapport with Stephanie, and the most we could really get her to do was feed the ducks down at the river that borders our campus. Today, Stephanie is an entrepreneur. She runs her own successful dog walking business. She is an employee of Hohepa Canterbury. She's a valued member of our recruitment team, and she does courier deliveries to our services every Thursday. Stephanie also has a volunteer role as a peer supporter, helping with another lady that we support to engage her in her wider community, something Stephanie is very successful at. Stephanie is thriving, charming, and a real bright contributor to our community. Stephanie's support hours have also reduced dramatically. She has staff for the early part of her day, then she takes a break from them before they come back a bit later in the day to make sure everything's okay. And we foresee in Steph's future that will continue to reduce. Steph is also fully living her life. Next slide. As I've said, we know we make an impact, and we know that that's actually about the stories of the individuals we support. They're pretty cool, but we know it's bigger than that as well. Every life fully lived is ambitious because there are multiple different views of what a good life is and different experiences of what that feels like. Baz has had a very different experience coming into services in 1965 than her younger counterparts are going to have joining us in 2022. What we're starting to wonder about is how we put data sets together to measure whether a life is being fully lived. We have a lot of information, including data that tells that story, but how do we use that in a way that demonstrates that what we're doing is useful, impactful, or of value? We've figured out some of the threats, and we certainly need to figure out how to pull that together. Our future as a disability provider is a really dynamic one. The world around us is changing, and we know we've got to change and adapt with that too. We're going to need to demonstrate not only to our government funders, but also to the individuals and their families that we're serving, that the things we are doing have got value. We've got lots of stories of individuals. How do we scale that up? We've been doing what we do for a long time. I think we know that it's impactful. We're really wanting to be able to articulate that in a different way, and we think social impact offers us a framework to do that. We've really enjoyed being a part of this process. It's been important for our thinking and challenging us to consider our journey. Thank you to everybody on the panel, BDO and Impact Lab for the opportunity. We hope we've interested you in our story and that we may be able to engage you to support us on our social impact journey. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Anna. That was, it's great to see the passion that you have for the sector and also your understanding of the sector. For me, I'm not sure I've got so much a question as a lot of information to take in to clarify my understanding of where you are. And so the issue you've had is that you've arguably over-serviced the community you work in, the individuals of the community you work in the past. And I understand the funding model's changed, which seems to be maybe a good thing to help you intervene in the specific places you want to intervene. Each case is personal, so there is going to be judgment as to what the appropriate intervention is with each person, but trying to determine using Impact Lab and the Good Measure report and the data you have to try and work out where the best place to intervene is really a change that's going on in your sector and where you see the value. Is that, sorry, it's probably more me clarifying my understanding than a question. Is that right? Am I on the right track? Obviously, I'm not an expert in this sector either, yeah.
I feel like that's actually a fantastic summary, and you could have written that last slide for me much better than I did, so thank you for that. And
so what do you see as the biggest, again, it's always, again, great, fantastic to hear the story of Joel and Stephanie and Baz. That's the challenge we have, changing awesome stories into, I'm going to say statistics. That's not the right way to phrase it. I don't want to take a story into a statistic, but that we can use. What do you see as the key thing that you would change or you would like to change to help you to do that?
I think for us, it's trying to understand and capture those data points that really evidence the impact of what we're doing. And so for us, I think I can't imagine, although that could be a limit of my imagination, how you quantitatively put data sets to people's experience of their own life being fully lived. But there's certainly touch points there where I think we are having a wider impact. The cost, for example, of Stephanie being in a psychiatric inpatient facility for a prolonged period of time is absolutely massive. That, you know, Joel in his mid-20s facing a future of 24/7 support when in actual fact the lightest touch is far better. So I think it's going to be really for us trying to articulate really what are those touch points that help put the hard data to our story. That's what I see as being the thing to pinpoint.
Okay, fantastic. And that's something that a Good Measure report will help you on that journey, to use the phrase, yeah. Great, thank you very much. As I'm about to say we've run out of time for questions, but as Lisa or Bill or Justin, have you got a quick time for a question for Anna, or are we okay?
Okay.
I gave you the option, but didn't really give you the opportunity because we're running out of time. So thanks again, Anna. That's brilliant, and we're bang on time. So I'm doing my job okay. I won't get told off at the end. So now we'll move on to Arthritis New Zealand, and we've got Richard and Philip presenting. I'm not sure who's going to take the lead, but Richard and Philip, again, thanks for giving your time. We look forward to hearing your story about Arthritis New Zealand, and again, particularly, your challenges in measuring impact and what you're looking to achieve.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and we really appreciate this opportunity, and thanks to Impact Lab, BDO, and I would like to also acknowledge all the other presenters, because I think it's heartfelt to hear the impact that we're having in today's society. So yeah, today we would just like to go over what arthritis is up to and just where we can make greater impact. So if we go to the next slide, please. So it's interesting that we have around about 750,000 New Zealanders affected by arthritis. You'd think that often that is seen as an older person's condition, but we know that 50% of those people are of working age. And that impact actually has an increase in terms of those who retire early, or obviously in terms of productivity. There are three main types. You've got your osteoarthritis, your rheumatoid arthritis, and the one we want to focus on today is actually around gout arthritis, and some people don't even know it's part of an arthritis family, of which 210,000 people in New Zealand suffer from it. We've been going about 50 years, just over 50 years, with a mission to improve the quality of life for everyone affected by arthritis. And we've got 22 staff over 5 locations, and around 80% of our funding comes from grants and donations. So very much the focus in terms of support from donors. Next slide, please. So in 2019, what we did was we had to relook and thought, what difference are we making? And I think it's really important that we came up with 7 strategic initiatives that started to articulate the difference we wanted to make in community. And I've picked out the 3 that really talk about impact. And if we look at number 2, we're talking about the measurement of our effectiveness of our programs. And why is that? Because we want to expand our reach and we want to improve the lives of everyone with arthritis. The second is about tūtiriti. It's about who the communities we're working with and the impact we can make with them. And I think the whole catalyst of change we're looking at. So we don't always have to lead, we often have to just follow and support. And lastly, in terms of our research, which is we have said we must be proactive and translational, and it will provide a robust evidence to inform the development and delivery of programs. So it's all about what difference are we making. So this point at 2019 was critical for us. Could we go to the next slide, please? So what's our journey look like? Well, in the past, it's been very much around finding out the economic costs of arthritis, and we've done 3 reports there, and we actually know that it's about $12.3 billion a year in terms of both direct costs and also well-being. We've tried to do a little bit around the Stanford impact measures, looked at the impact we've made over a 3-month period, but a lot of this has been ad hoc. So what we decided in 2019 was, right, we're going to make a difference. And so what does the future look like? Well, the future looks like the fact that we've appointed a research manager, and Richard will talk to us very shortly. We're just in the process of developing a customer relationships management system that starts to look at having a conversation, starts to have a relationship with those consumers in the community so we know what they're thinking and what difference needs to be made. And lastly, what we've said is made a commitment that every program that we put in place must have something around impact. What difference, again, are we making? So I'm going to hand over to Richard now, and he's going to take over the next section.
Next slide, please. Thank you very much, Philip. Now, if you could go to the next slide, please. We have chosen to illustrate our impact story with the example of gout arthritis because it allows us to demonstrate the type of impact our organisation has for Māori and Pacifica communities, which relates to our third strategic initiative. As Philip has noted, gout arthritis affects approximately 210,000 New Zealanders, which is actually a very similar figure to those with diabetes type 2. While this figure keeps increasing, our evidence base clearly shows that Māori and Pacific peoples are disproportionately affected by gout. They are respectively 2 and 3 times more likely to have gout at a younger age, but also more severely than other population groups in this country. Gout is also hereditary or passed on from generation to generation. Key research has shown that there are specific gene variants that mean for Māori and Pacific peoples, the chance of having gout arthritis is increased by more than 5 times. There is a significant association with whakamā or shame for all people who suffer from gout. The stigma is rooted in old-fashioned yet strong beliefs that it is an illness that is self-inflicted through behaviours such as alcohol consumption or eating too much kai moana. It is also important to note that gout can be treated in a low-cost way using medications such as allopurinol, which is considered a first-line treatment and most commonly prescribed medication for the condition. In monetary terms, it can cost about $100 per year for a patient to receive 4 prescriptions every 3 months and see their GP at least once this time. At present, it's estimated that only 43% of all New Zealanders with gout are currently using any type of medication, and this figure is 39% for Māori and 34% for Pacific peoples. Arthritis New Zealand is aiming to increase this figure to 55% by 2024, which would in turn have an extremely significant impact via saving approximately $250 million per annum to our health system. Next slide, please. I would like to share with you a case study now of Joseph, a 70-year-old Samoan New Zealander, to demonstrate what we are calling lived impact. Lived impact is how a person and their whānau's well-being can be positively transformed through them actively participating in a program or type of treatment. Joseph has lived with gout arthritis since his late 30s. Around his mid-50s, he started being prescribed allopurinol to improve his condition. For much of his working life, he was a bus driver and experienced significant physical pain. He frequently had to take time off work because of this, which resulted in him running out of sick leave, which in turn reduced the amount of money he was earning. Ultimately, this led to significant financial pressures for his family, as well as whakamā. This example shows the negative lived impact of gout on a personal and familial level, but also a physical, professional, and cultural level. However, once Joseph started to better manage his gout, an important part of which included being regularly reminded by his daughters to take his allopurinol, the lived impact of his gout arthritis shifted to be positive. It enabled him, amongst other things, as you can see from his vibrant quotations, to eat anything with joy and laughter, and how a family's alofa or love can help overcome any whakamā you feel living with gout. Next slide, please. Our organisation has been measuring impact for a number of years, but we haven't really done this in a consistent way across our different work streams that include health advice, education, awareness, advocacy and fundraising. In 2020, our senior managers established a formal program to ensure our impact measurement will be done more regularly across our different work streams to address this limitation. Drawing on the skills of the Impact Lab team, we would be able to further build and embed impact measures within Arthritis New Zealand, while also learning new insights about impact measurement that could broaden our knowledge in this space. We also anticipate that the national health reforms being undertaken at the moment will undoubtedly lead to increased expectations around evidence-based reporting with regards to impact in the charities and NGO sector. Doing good better will enable us to demonstrate the difference we are making with individuals and communities, discover what our social return on investment actually is, and also strengthen our programs and initiatives in place. It is vital to stress that if we are successful, it wouldn't be just for Arthritis New Zealand's benefit. In 2021, we commenced a new partnership with the Health Foundation, Diabetes New Zealand and Mahitahi Haora to appoint Tahi Tate to support people in Northland who live with one or more comorbidities such as heart disease, diabetes and gout arthritis. Because it is the norm for us to work in such a collaborative manner, we know that what we would learn from working alongside the Impact Lab team and seeing your good measure calculation being applied to our mahi and data could be shared in very meaningful ways with our aforementioned partners. This in turn would assist them in their own work and go some way to helping them come closer to achieving their respective strategic visions. We believe being successful today would ultimately provide a longer term benefit for those we serve with arthritis, but also everyone we engage and work with. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. And as always, I've learned a bit more about arthritis and remind myself what gout is. So extremely informative again. Sybil, do you have some questions for Richard and Philip on their thoughts?
Yeah, thanks very much, Philip. Great to see you've got Tahi on the job. We've done some work with them in the Māori disability area, and he was very effective. And that alliance has been about 30 years after it could have happened. So it's great to see that happening as well.
Yeah.
You're in the health sector, which in our experience is more data literate than the social sector. They've just a bit more used to dealing with stuff that gets counted. Because they're also much better funded, right? So almost anything you do in health gets funded quite a bit better.
We wish.
Yeah, well, maybe you're not so much in the NGO side of it. So I'm just interested in your view on sort of data developments in there that might, in the health system, that might meet your need, because your example's a great example. And you'd think that looks like low-hanging fruit, right? A cheap treatment, a population that's sort of more easily identified, not ambiguous at all.
So Bill, absolutely. So firstly, the data is there. So if you look at the Gout Atlas by health quality, there's a lot of information about the numbers of people, and that's where we're getting the information. What isn't there is the fact that we have this opportunity, and in fact they've been talking about it. Leanne Takaru would say we've been talking about this for the last 20 years, but we've done nothing about it. So in fact, I suppose what we're trying to show here is that the impact of the change of the information of ability to change lives needs to be articulated across different groups so that we actually get commitment to change the way we think and the way we act. So the actual data is there. It's just getting it more consistent and actually implemented.
Yeah. And so you think something like a good measure would help translate between the strategy and the implementation?
Critical. And it's interesting where you look at elements of this, because there's so many hidden issues here around, a lot of the people with gout don't even have a GP, and they only use, say, the pharmacy to go and get medication. So there's lots of issues here that, in terms of a right for measurement and change, so that we can intervene much more effectively.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thank you. And thank you once again, Richard and Philip. Again, I'm looking at my timetable. We're about on time. So that's been fantastic. Thank you once again to all our finalists. A lot of information to take in. So as always in these things, I've learned a huge amount. So thank you for your time and your time taken to prepare for the presentation, which was really came through. What we'll do now, just for the final bit before we go offline and talk behind the scenes, is you will just hear from each judge as to any thoughts on the presentations they've seen and their thoughts on how that might link into an Impact Lab good measure report. So the order I've got is, again, Sybil, have you got a sort of a summary as to what you've heard over lunchtime and your thoughts on how Impact Lab could be involved?
Well, first of all, just thank you all very much for going to the trouble of it. And it's just so, Impact Lab works in an environment where there's a growing understanding of the benefits, not just the requirements, but the benefits of a more focused understanding of what happens with the customers, which is a word we use because it's a bit irritating and makes you focus on what actually happens with the person with gout or the homeless woman as more important than anything else. So that's great to hear that focus. Some of the issues that are raised, you know, the actual impact lab good measure won't solve. Okay, so there's a class of problems there that have been described, which are to do, as I think we commented a bit earlier, to do with whether you can get sufficient knowledge about what happens to the people you're intervening with and how that knowledge is shared on a local basis and the problems of transients and so on. And it seems to me that the best response to that kind of problem is a community that focuses a bit on those issues. And we're trying to build our own high trust community with customers who organisations who are delivering services that we now know well, and they've had a positive experience, and building out a few other entities, a bit of an ecosystem that's going to help deal with some of these other issues. So, you know, whatever happens about who we get to deal with just as a result of this exercise, the way that these leaders are talking is just so effective. And you know, if we can all head in that direction, then we're going to be doing good better at one by one, which is where you know that it happens. You know, the policy level, it's all a bit general, and it's great to hear the focus on smaller groups of people where you can actually bring about change, and we want to help you measure the size of that change, not just for self-congratulation that you're doing a good job, because you'll all be doing some benefit, but to work out how to scale it, how to get more people through it, how to improve that actual change. Can you do more faster? Because there's an awful lot of need out there yet.
Great, thank you very much. So Bill, Lisa, have you got any comments to add from what you've heard?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say, you know, great job not just on today, but just the impact that the organisations are each making, which, you know, is great to see. And I loved that each one of them wanted to strive to have deeper impact and to really understand that. Probably some feedback, you know, it'd be really good to, I think, understand and be clear on what the change is that each of them are trying to measure, and how measuring that, what you're actually going to do with that data to really further enhance, you know, what the organisation's doing. And I think, you know, measurement of impact goes beyond just surface data and some of those quick surface tangible measures. You know, there's a lot of unintended and probably not so obvious impact that each of those organisations are having. And it would be really good to understand what that is as well. But yeah, great job. Really loved listening to each one of them.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, quite critical to understand that intervention logic and how it actually changes, what changes you're looking for. Justin, have you got any final thoughts?
Look, being a good accountant, I've been keeping a little spreadsheet and making some notes as I go, but conscious of time as well. So really just to wrap up from me to say thank you all. You've made our decision-making process very difficult because they're 5 fantastic presentations. So thank you all taking the time to do that. It was fascinating, interesting, and yeah, wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Justin. And just a sum up for me, I've just got a brief comment on each of the presentations again, which, as I said before, I've learned a huge amount, which you get to in professional services. You get to see what everybody else is doing and copy their ideas, to be honest. You know, Sisters of Compassion, what a great organisation, what a great history and legacy. I love the idea that you're looking for, you know, what is the greatest need in New Zealand and being able to change and pivot. And so the idea that Impact Lab could be involved in helping you make that decision is pretty cool. But yeah, what a fantastic legacy, and Chris doing a great job of looking at that, to make sure you're continuing to build on the legacy that you have, which is great. Nisa, again, for me, the idea that a business can do good, you know, I love the idea of highlighting that and highlighting social enterprise. I mean, Lisa's here with Eat My Lunch, but you know, the idea that you can run a successful business, turn a profit, and have a massive impact in the social space as well. Like, you know, we all know that, but we want to highlight that more, understand that more, and tell more people about that to get more social entrepreneurs out there. I think that's a real solution, isn't it, to some of the current issues that we're facing. Friendship House Trust, again, comes back to Sir Bill's point about being able to share data and how we can get that information, but it's just proves how critical it is, particularly in difficult areas like that, of getting the right information from the right people to help understand your impact, and that is a challenge. I haven't got a better way to respond to that, than that's a challenge. Just on Holheba, again, great to have those personal stories. For me as an accountant, the idea that we're over-servicing and essentially overspending, we're spending money in an area that's just a waste of money and not doing good for the people that we're looking after. So the idea that we're thinking about that and we're going to save money in this space and spend it in a more effectively in another area, that turns my wheels as an accountant, that we're thinking like that. So it's great that the sector is changing, and for Impact Lab to be part of that, to really pinpoint where the work should be, is great. And again, Arthritis New Zealand, interesting, you talked about sharing with other organisations and Diabetes New Zealand and others, how we could be involved with somebody like you, and that would have a flow-on effect to other partners and other organisations working in a similar space, sort of thing. So all great reasons and great advantages how I can see you working with Impact Lab, and of course BDO should the need arise. I should add that in there. So thanks once again for everyone's been involved. Thanks very much to the 5 finalists. Thanks to the 45 or so who entered initially, to the 5 finalists who spent time putting your applications in today. Such a cliche, but it's going to be hard to pick a winner, isn't it? Thanks to everyone else who's been involved, the guys at Impact Lab and behind the scenes at BDO for putting this on. Thanks particularly to Sir Bill and Lisa and giving up your time to help us come to this decision, which we'll do straight after this call. You know, it's been a great exercise, something I've really enjoyed and learned a lot from. So thank you very much all. I think that's all from us. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.